Hi everyone. In the last video, we have started the concept of functions. I said there are two types of functions. Those are the first one is user defined functions and second one built-in functions, right? Whatever the functions which are already predefined are known as predefined functions, or we can say reserved functions, or we call it as built-in functions. Some of the examples we have seen that scanf and printf, which are defined in the library called stdio.h. Now, so in today's session also we are going to discuss about the various types of user-defined functions, right? And we also discussed in the last session the main purpose of using the functions is for debugging purpose, and second one is to improve the clarity, and third one we discussed is modularity. So not only modularity, you can use another important feature that is called reusability. Now, in today's class, we will discuss what is mean by the reusability, and after that, we are going to see the syntax of the first kind of function next to second one, and so on. Let us discuss what is mean by the reusability. The term we are writing here is reusability. Here we are going to use, or we call it as reuse the code. Reuse the code. Now, what does it mean? For example, we have written a program, right, with assume that five functions. Five functions. Please remember the another name for the function is we call it as module or procedure. We can use any name, function or module or procedure. Now assume that the program that we have written consisting of five functions, right? We have written these five functions in the program. Assume that in today's class. Now assume that after 1 year, if you want to use some of the two functions which are very important, which are written in the program, those two functions or modules can be reused, right? Not only five functions, if you want to reuse any kind of function or module, that can be reused whenever you want in later stages. So that is the main important thing known as the reusability. So after completing these important characteristics or the advantages of functions, now we are going to see the syntax of the first one, first type of user defined functions. We mentioned that there are four types, right? First, I'm going to talk about the first one. The first function, I said that a function without return type, without return type and without arguments, without arguments. Okay. So how to write the syntax for this type of functions? Now, what is the syntax? See here, we are going to write the prototype here. Prototype, very, very important term, the prototype. What is mean by the prototype? It is nothing but the function declaration, the process of specifying the name of the function and the return type of the function, and also the type of parameters it is going to take as an input, that is called the function declaration. Prototype, or we can say function declaration. Now we will see the prototype or function declaration for this kind of functions. Now what we are going to write is, here we are going to mention return type, and here name of the function, or we call it as the function name, and here we are mentioning the parameters, and here you put semicolon. So this is known as function prototype, or simply we call it as prototype, right? All the four kinds of functions are going to have the same type of prototype: return type, function name, and parameters list. See here, for our example, the return type is without return type. Without return type means we are going to write the word void. Please remember, the built-in data type or basic data type void indicates that nothing, means it is not going to return anything. Void means empty, or we call it as nothing. So without return type means here the return type is void and the name of the function we are going to write. And I said without arguments means without any parameters. It's not going to take any type of parameters as input. It is optional, right? Any function is going to have the same kind of syntax: return type, function name, parameters list. So now for this example, I will write it as without return type means we are writing the void, and the name of the function, assume that I'm writing disp means display, and here in bracket I'm not mentioning anything. You see void display and I'm not mentioning anything means empty. This is empty. Empty in the sense indirectly it is void. Void name of the function, again void, means the return type is nothing and this is the name of the function, and the name of the parameters are also nothing. That means without arguments. This is the first kind of user defined function. Now coming to the second one, we are talking about the second one. Just to remember, without means without return type and without arguments. Now in the second case we are writing a function without return type, and with arguments, So this is also having the same syntax like a return type, okay, name of the function, name, and here parameter list, and we know this is nothing but the prototype. Everything is same, but here the example for this is return type is without. Without means simply we write void, name of the function, any name you can take, assume that we are taking again display, but here we are mentioning parameters. Assume that I am writing like this, int comma int. In the previous declaration the parentheses are empty, but here I am taking int comma int. So int comma int, the meaning of this is the name of the function is display and it is not going to return anything, means without return type, and but it is going to take with arguments. How many types of arguments? Two types of arguments. And what is the type of the arguments? Int comma int. We are mentioning the data type, but what are the names of the variables? Here I am not mentioning. This is optional. Instead of saying like this, you can also say void display. You can also mention the name of the variables integer a, integer b. So this is also valid, but no need to mention the names of the variables in the function prototype or in the function declaration. Now in the parameters list or within the arguments list, you have to mention the type as well as the name, but our names are optional. This is the second type of user defined function. Now coming to third one, a function with a return type and without arguments. Here also the syntax is same, return type, function name, but here I am giving one example, a function with return type. Assume that I am writing like this. Int is the return type, and assume that the name of the function we are taking as display, and without arguments. I am not mentioning any arguments. This is empty, or we can write it as void. So this is a user defined function with a return type and without arguments. Now fourth one is of type a function with return type and with arguments. So for this, what you write, and as an example, you write integer display. Here I am writing integer. Okay, you see this. In this, it is the return type. With return type, the name of the function is display, and it is taking arguments of type integer. How many types of arguments it is taking? Only one. Why? Because we have mentioned only one data type. So instead of writing like this, you can also say integer display. You can also mention the name, but the name of the variable or parameter is optional here. This is the function declaration, or we can say function prototype. So now we have discussed the simple examples as well as the syntax of the functions, user defined functions. Now, another important thing which is associated with the functions are the concept of functions are mainly associated with three important things, very important. First one is whenever we use the concept of user defined function, the first thing you have to do is function declaration. Function declaration, or we can say it as function prototype. Function prototype. And second thing is function calling. And third one is function definition. These are the three important things. Function definition. Right? Now, if you define the function, for example, every C program starts with the main function, right? Okay. Now, here assume that I'm going to use some function display. I'm calling the function display, and I have defined the function here. Assume that void display, and here writing something. Then in this case, what happened is very important thing. What I want to say is when you define the function before the main, when you define the function, user defined function before the main, what happens is first the compilation process starts from the hash include stdio.h. Next, after that, it is going to see void display, and this is the function definition. When the function definition is done before the main, then there is no need to use the concept of function prototype. Function prototype is not necessary when you define the user defined function before the main. But when you define the user defined function after the main, then compulsory you have to mention the prototype in the main. Okay, but the best practice is better to declare the function, next go for the function calling, after that function definition. These are the important things you should remember while implementing the user defined functions. After completing this, next what we are going to do is we are going to see some example programs for how to implement the user defined functions. So let us go to the Visual Studio Code to implement the C programs using functions. Now we will see the programs using Visual Studio Code. First, we are going to implement the program for the first type. After that, second one, third one, and fourth one. So first, let us implement the program of first kind. Right? So that we are going to see here. So go to the new file. Here I'm going to the new file, and here you write function 1. I'm writing it as function 1. Function 1 means first type, function 1 dot c. Right? Now, write in comments program to implement a function without return type, and without arguments, So this is the program we are going to implement. Program to implement a function without return type and without arguments. Okay, as usually the program starts with hash include stdio.h. Right, next you write integer main. Every C program starts with the main. All the user defined functions are going to called from the main. Now, okay, the important thing is after the opening brace of the main, this is the place where you are going to declare the variables as well as the functions, right? You can declare the variables and the functions. So when we discussed about the syntax of the functions, So the declaration is, first you have to mention the type, return type of the function name, function. Next you have to write the name of the function. After that you have to mention the parameter list with their type, right? Now what I'm going to write is, here I'm going for the function declaration, right? So I said that there are three important things: function declaration, function calling, function definition, or you can say function declaration, function definition, and function calling, right? Now I'm writing the function declaration. Assume that I'm going to use void. Why? Because without return type. Now the name of the function I'm going to use is display, disp I'm writing, and I'm using empty parenthesis. Empty parenthesis. So here it is, function without return type, and without arguments. Okay. Now, so instead of writing the empty parenthesis here, you can also mention here void. You can use this word. Okay. This is the function declaration, right? Now, after function declaration, the important thing is function calling. Just I'm writing calling. This is only the calling. I'm writing it as function calling. Function calling. See the difference between function prototype. This we call it as function prototype, or function. What do we say? This is function prototype. Function prototype, and this is function calling. If you observe the main difference between this and this, here we are mentioning the name of the function, and before this return type, and also the type of arguments it is going to take. Okay, so here void means with nothing is there. Here also void. Return type is nothing, without return type, without arguments. But when you call the function, just we are mentioning the name of the function. That's all. No need to mention the return type, and okay, here the type of the arguments. But here if there are any arguments, you have to pause the arguments in function calling. But here we are using empty parenthesis, means no arguments are there. Why? Because in the function prototype we mentioned as void. Now after the main block, so inside the main we are declaring this function. Okay, now the important thing you have to remember that main is the function which is going to use the display function. Whenever the main calls the display is going to perform its own task. So now after after declaration and calling, you have to mention the definition. So the definition of the function is going to consist of return type and the name of the function display, and here no arguments, and you write opening brace and closing brace here. In this, just you write a statement printf welcome to display function slash n, right, semicolon. See here in the main, the last statement we write is return 0. Now clearly I will explain this program. See, when you observe the display definition, this we call it as definition, function definition. This entire block is called function definition. Not only first statement, this total block is called function definition. Here don't put semicolon here. Why? Because the control stops only here. No semicolon here, right? Now another important thing is, if you write this same function definition before the main, then this function return type is not necessary. Very important thing is, whenever you define the function before the main, this function prototype is not necessary. You see here, I'm removing this. Assume that I'm removing. We will check whether there is any error. Okay, now I'm running this. We'll check any error is there. You see here, we got the output, welcome to display function. Welcome to display function. We got the output without mentioning the prototype also. What I want to clarify you is that when you define the function before the main, then the function prototype is not necessary. Now, whenever you define the function after the main, function prototype is necessary. Now, you see the execution part. You see it is giving some errors, right? It is giving some errors, warnings, but it is displaying the output. But we got some errors, right? You observe these errors. Some errors you will get once you run again our display. You see this. We got error, so that we display problem something we got, right? Some error warnings we will get, that you carefully remember. So better to go for function declaration, function calling, and function definition. So now previously what I said is here function return type. I have mentioned void. The name of the function is display, right? Here I mentioned void. No need to mention void, but you can mention. This what I said is, I said function prototype. Function prototype, right? Now if I execute this program without any warnings, so directly we'll get the output, welcome to display function, right? Now, after this, what we are going to do is, another important thing I want to clarify you, that why we are using the concept of user-defined functions. See here, when you write the lengthy program by using only one main function, then what happens? The burden on the main function increases. To reduce the burden of the main, what we are going to do is, the big task we are dividing into subtasks, and each subtask is assigned to a subfunction, right? All the subfunctions are going to perform their subtasks. After completion of their subtasks, they are going to return the status of the work to the main. That is very, very important, right? So whenever we use the display function, this is function, actually how the execution is taken place here is, so first here as include, okay, execution starts from the main, and this is the function prototype, okay. After that, the function is called, which function? Display. The main is calling display function, right? This is called function calling. From this display, the control is directly jumped to the function definition here, and it prints welcome to display function, right? After printing this printf statement, the control returns back from this closing brace to again here to the main. So the control is jumping from the main to the display function. Upon executing the body of the display, again the control returns back to the statement after the display, that is called return 0. Okay, after executing the return 0, then only the program, the main function terminates, right? So this is the main flow of control between the main and user defined functions, right? So now we will see the next type of user defined function. So first one is without arguments and without return type. I'm going to convert the same program. You can write a new file, but I'm going to convert the same program into the second type. Program to implement a function without return type and with, I'm using with arguments. Just I'm writing with arguments. What does it mean? See here don't write void. Why? Because we are going to take some return type. See here, in the second, what I'm going to do is, in the main function, we are calling the display, right? When we call the display function in the main, we have to pass some argument. Why? Because we are mentioning that the function is going to take the argument as the input. Who is going to pass the input? The main. So you have to pass the input to the display, right? For that, you take a variable called some integer a, right? Who has to give the value for a? Main only. So main has to pass the value to the display. Now what you do is printf, enter the value of a, enter enter the value, enter the value of a, okay, right? Now you do one thing, read the value scanf percentage d double quotes close comma ampersand a. Now after reading this a should be passed to the display, right? First read this, okay. Now this function declaration, see here, function declaration must to be at the top, variable declaration as well as the function declaration must be done at the same place, okay. Now if you observe this is the variable declaration, right? Variable declaration, right? And second one is the function prototype, okay, and enter the value of a, we are reading the value of a, but here we are calling which function? Display. But you have to pass an argument, right? What is the argument? A. You pass a. Now in the function prototype, see here you have to mention that type, return type. What is the return type? I'm mentioning int. In the function prototype, just now I discussed that no need to mention the name of the variable here. If you want to mention a, no problem, but no need. Okay. Now in the function calling, we are calling the function by only specifying the name as well as we are passing the value a. Now assume that a value 10. When we are passing a value 10 to the display by we are calling the display function by passing a value 10, right? Then automatically from here the control is passed to this block. Now in this block what we are going to do is we are going to print the value of a, okay. The value of a is just you print /n and you are going to print the value comma a. See, we are supplying the value of a from the main to the display and display is taking that value and it is going to print the value. See here, at the time of calling a, we are passing a. To receive a, here you have to mention the data type integer, but here the name is necessary. The name of the variable here is mandatory. Carefully observe this. The execution starts from the main a variable. This is function prototype. We are accepting some value, a value 10, and we are calling display a value how much? 10. Directly we are passing here. This a is passed to this a. Very important thing is this a belongs to display, whereas this a belongs to main. Please remember, both are treated as different. The a of display is going to take the value of a of main and it prints the value in the display. That's all. This is a simple program for the second kind of function. Let us run this. So it is asking enter the value of a. Who is going to read the value of a? Main. Assume that I'm giving 10. So we are passing this value 10 to the display function to print it. See here, the value of a is 10, right? One important thing already I said that after execution of the display function, the control again goes back to this return 0 and here the program terminates. So these are the two important C programming examples to discuss about a function without return type and without arguments and a function without return type and with arguments. The next two kinds of programs we will see in the next class. With this, I'm going to close the session. Thank you very much for watching.